Hello. Hey, hi. It is I, Dr. Beep Boop, and today we're going to talk about Jamiroquai. The piece is called I Was His Cosmic Girl, and I wrote it in January of 2024, or I published it in January of 2024, and it was a result of 2023 being the 30-year anniversary of Jamiroquai's first album, and in this piece, I remember it through the lens of love. The important message here is that this piece and the heartbreak in this piece isn't about the terrible things that my ex-husband did to me. It's not that. That's not what this piece is. This piece is partially about looking back on relationships that went south and seeing the true beauty in them. I think that there are phases in our lives where maybe in our 40s, we spend a great deal of time regretting people we chose, regretting lives that we chose. We might look back and say, dang, I would really like to have that time back that I gave to somebody who didn't deserve it. But instead, when you turn 50-ish, you look back and you're like, they did deserve my time. That relationship did deserve my time. It doesn't mean that we were intended to be together forever. I wanted that. He wanted that. It was something we wanted, but it's an example about how heartbreak sometimes comes from the more authentic space. It's a more authentic place sometimes when heartbreak happens because we have to decide that people aren't good for us or that the lives that we would lead with them aren't right for us. And instead of looking back on those relationships as awful things, dang, I wish I had that time back, we can instead look back and say, no, I loved him and I believe that he loved me. And that doesn't mean that who he is as a person is up for grabs in this piece either. This really is, from my perspective, this really is about me. It is not about my ex-husband. I think the thing about memoir work for everyone to keep in mind as we continue to go through this entire podcast, the Substack, everything that is about memoir and music. And that is this: memoir is often written as a safer option than making declarations that hail other people's experiences, right? So if I say, listen, the way that I came across this band should tell you a lot about my experiences with people from other cultures, what those things mean, what it's like to love someone whose culture is fully at war, right? And it's about that from my perspective, because what I would not do if I'm including people from other cultures is step forward and declare things as facts. Instead, memoir allows you to say, this happened. I felt these things. I think these things might be shared by others because I can make observations. And then it says, the prompt is, can you reflect on that experience in your own lives? Or maybe if you're a person from another culture, you're an immigrant, or you're a child of immigrants. And when I speak about this, can you identify with the other experience? In other words, that would be my ex-husband's. Like, is there something identifiable for you in your relationships with the white people, the white Americans, that you can identify? And that's what these conversations are supposed to be. And that's what everything I do is. It's about conversation, which we'll talk about more at another date. But that's just something to consider. So in the early days of the Substack, this was really just a place. It was really a place for me to hold my multimodal pieces. I take photos and videos of the shows that I go to. I'm not sure how that practice will continue, right? But in this piece, I don't have any footage on the Substack because I've never seen Jamiroquai live. Yeah, I mean, if it's announced and Jamiroquai comes anywhere near a place I can get to, I will be there buying a ticket. Part of it is because of this. Now, when I wrote this piece in 2024, I was coming to terms with my marriage in my 20s, but it had just been 2023 had just had the 30-year anniversary of Jamiroquai's first album, Emergency on Planet Earth. It's much more political than the rest of his pieces and the rest of their albums. And I think if the jokes that I'm thinking of at the top of my head don't appear in this piece, then I'll include them toward the end because I think they're highly valuable. Some of those jokes say a lot about the experience of dating or being married to somebody from a culture, especially one that was at the time still currently trying to recover from collapse. Yeah. My goal with everything that I've been writing is to heal from my past. One of the ways that we do that, that we heal, is by shedding the shame of maybe decisions we made, handling and grappling with the feelings of rejection or feelings of heartbreak, or that feeling that we look back and think we wasted our time. We didn't. And I think what this piece was coming to terms with is that I didn't waste my time by being married to this man. I didn't. We're going to call him G. I didn't waste my time in that marriage. I wanted it to work. And I believe he wanted it to work. He didn't want it. He did not want the divorce. He didn't at the time, but not very many people I knew, blamed me for getting divorced either. But the important part is that we both did want it to work. If I could go back in time and find a way to make it work, I might have done that. But I think that regret is something that I'm grappling with. But on the other side of grappling with that sense of regret, that those feelings like, oh, I either want those years back, or, oh, this person didn't treat me very well. They were just sort of a waste. No. What I'm saying now at this age, this would have been late 40s to 50, was to say, no, I see why I'd made that choice and it was valuable. So this piece, the 30-year anniversary of Jamiroquai's first album, Emergency on Planet Earth, arrived right there in the middle of my labor to heal from my past. It's still ongoing, but it was a loss of what we had that reemerged as heartbreak, and not how terrible it became. Sometimes it's an actual war that inspires the war between us and those we love. And some wars we just don't win. I didn't give Jamiroquai much attention prior, even when we began to see JK on our screens following the release of Traveling Without Moving. You'd be hard-pressed to find an American Gen Xer who doesn't remember JK's smooth sliding into a bright, institutionalized room with a crow swooping in and out. It was iconic, right? It was iconic. Virtual insanity, it explains why he's in an asylum, blah, blah, right? But he's being very smooth. Like, there's something about the effects in the floor. And we remember this, but I remember the video, and I remember how I later met G and became his cosmic girl. He loved that song, and we danced to it together. It felt like I was dancing to a song about how awesome I was. And I guess I was, though. Yeah. I guess I was. Side note, though, I remember Chris Rock's parody for the MTV Awards, though this was before G and I met. And it was, Chris Rock was like, will somebody please turn off the floor? Man, I think that chicken put my eye out. That was the line that I remember just, oh God, I rolled from that one. But I had not met G yet, and therefore was not properly introduced to Jamiroquai. So G, should be known, cared not a whiff for the concept of game. This right here might be something I appreciate the most about G, in retrospect. You don't have game if you decide that your detour to another country you dislike involves a girl you feel you can't leave, right? G had zero interest in having game because he didn't want to play with affection. Why would he choose someone he wasn't unequivocally sure about and was also sure about him? Why would he choose anyone else? And I agree with that. Now, it's tough. Because sometimes the person that you want to be that person isn't. And I would say that my life is a story of how that person isn't, if anything. But I think this piece shows that it could have worked if we were under different circumstances, but Jamiroquai was G's favorite band when we met in 1997. Yeah, 1997. And I can still hear JK's voice, and it's like instantly I'm back in 1998, and he and I are being silly in our living room with a level of glee I'm not sure I felt with anyone after, even if it also conjures the pain of what happened later. One of the earliest moments of interest was when G needed to have his educational transcripts translated, and it was outrageously expensive. But if he was going to stay in the US, we'd have to figure it out. So he gave me his transcripts to go over with him so he could make sure he understood everything. And this was one of the functions that I assisted with in our relationship was he, because he was staying not only for me, but partially for me, um, he had the benefit of somebody who would sit and help him work through things. But I think also one of the reasons he fell in love with me is that I was that person who wanted to have exchange in teaching. I wanted to hear everything about him. I wanted to hear everything about his culture, and I wanted to tell him everything about the one he was in and how to function. And I think that he loved that. But I remember looking at our transcripts or his transcripts, and the conversation went kind of like this. Me, gee, what's this class? Basic defense? Yeah, it's like intro to doing war things, like driving tanks. I'm not going to do his accent, okay? I'm not going to do it. Me, what? Tanks? You learned to drive tanks in high school? Mache, you can't call it high school, but yes, we had to take it. Why? So Tito could just mobilize a bunch of kids? She stares back seriously. Me. What else did you learn? Much I could kill you and your friends, but I could also kill your enemies with a tank and proper way to throw any bombs? Yeah, it's not a big thing, me. Um, okay. What? I'm serious. Maybe you should learn. Nice. I'm going to tell my friends. But for a fair amount of time, I was this cosmic girl, and there was no way you could convince him otherwise. Something I remember keenly was the way he'd touch my face when the line sends me into hyperspace when I see her pretty face, because he had a thing for my face. I remember him touching my face and saying, "You're so pretty, Mashka," as if it hurt down in his heart. It likely did. The line, "Step in my transporter so I can teleport you all around my heavenly body." He didn't talk overtly about things like my body because he knew there was a history of predation in my past, but sometimes there'd be a look in that line, and he'd stop every now and then and put his hands on my face and say with intensity, "And you're so fucking pretty. Ugh, I love you." G was from Macedonia, now called North Macedonia for reasons of high historical import, immigrating only about 5 years after Macedonia gained independence from Yugoslavia in 1991, with relative peace in obvious comparison to the after effects resulting in the Bosnian War. And yet, there was no way to avoid the dividing lines of religion and nationality aggravated by the process to reach independence and then war. He came to the USA to learn specifically American English. It was very different, he said. The presence of many international troops and journalists made translation a growing field that paid extremely well in his country, and his intention was to return with that knowledge to make money for his family. He was incredibly talented with languages and spoke 6 by the time I met him. Learn it. He was going to learn it, go home to his family and country, and secure a great income to navigate into what was next. I believe him, I did not say this in the piece, but I believe him saying that he had initially initially wanted to work on journalism and then moved to engineering, which is what he was going to major in the United States when he decided to stay. Until he met me and decided maybe he wouldn't go home. And there we have the crack that formed. Some folks whispered that he only wanted a green card, but I would smile and nod and say, no, with high confidence, even if he read this and decided to hurt me by denying it now. The thing is, it is entirely possible that he lands here and he's spending some time here and he's like, you know what? I don't think I want to go home. And it's entirely possible that he did say, well, maybe I could get a green card and stay. But I can tell you for sure that he did not. He did not choose me for only that reason. Okay. I think something that I loved the most about him was that he just, the bit where he didn't have game was a thing. And that is having game. Like, just move forward with honesty and you find the people who want you, right? But Jamiroquai had me stumped for a bit because while they are a great band, I couldn't see them being anyone's absolute favorite, right? But he just said, maybe if I listen to it enough, I get it. And I cracked up laughing because he wasn't good at being sneaky. And we laughed anyway because, of course, I'd listen more to something he loved. Of course I would. In retrospect, they were widely a favorite at this time. I was just too busy with spooky tunes and punk. And thing is that the way that you know somebody loves you or at least wants to learn about you genuinely is when they take interest in what you love. That's really the sign. And, maybe that's just a sign of my love. I don't know. But a couple of months into hanging out, I realized I wasn't hearing traveling without moving. It was something overtly environmentalist and raw. I remember washing dishes and I paused to shout, "The fuck? Is that JK singing about revolution?" And yeah, it was. And it was infectious. I said, I like what he's saying because I had to be clear over poetics with G. But we were dancing around and I feel confused. What are we doing? This topic isn't supposed to be fun. And that's, I think, what I felt in that moment was, and you could see like his face would just get so happy and so lost in the music. But at the same time, he's like, yeah, revolution. And, obviously it was meaning that in environmental terms, but also from his perspective, his country had been wealthy during communism. And so that is a thing. That's a thing to consider and the differences between our backgrounds. So in the following weeks to months following that, he threw on Return of the Space Cowboy more. It was difficult to stay moody, even when the topic was raising consciousness, though we often joked at JK's shifts through Return and then to traveling. This joke, I remember this, and I remember the two of us punting this, but it went something like this. JK, what the fuck is wrong with you people? Fix this shit right the fuck now. Never mind that I'm culturally appropriating, but yeah, revolution is the only way we can change. Yeah, I want to fight the power. Potential fans, wow, we dig this. What the hell is that sound? JK, it's a didgeridoo. Fans, we love it. Next album and we might give you more money. JK, oh, that's funky. Oh no, second album syndrome, what do I do? Now I am too high. Fans, honesty, we love a good struggle, but maybe ease up, here's more money. JK, snap, I'm rich and comfortable now and I can't find my anger. Ooh, girl. Fans, yeah, keep doing that for more albums now. It was just this evolution from being angry about revolution to getting money and being like, woo, girl. Because that's really sort of what traveling without moving kind of results in, right? That feel. But this level of energy with this smooth tone is exactly how I feel when I conjure those memories, especially some of G's hysterical hijinks, because this man did not give a single fuck about capitalistic bullshit and was pissed at economic injustice he said he simply hadn't witnessed as strongly under Tito's strong arm around the Balkans. Without him, G said, they simply couldn't control the tide of ethnic tensions. when I finally got to go to his country in 2001, I remember seeing the Romani, right? It was December 2000 to early 2001. So I saw the Romani and I nudged him and he stopped and said, "Why didn't I see that before?" And I asked him, "Was it there or is this a casualty?" I think that's why he loved me. While Emergency on Planet Earth won me over, Traveling Without Moving was our album because he would put it on and dance around with a new appreciation for that level of excitement over a woman. He'd never had that experience, I think. But he'd walk over and take my hands and we'd get enthusiastically stupid about it. And he'd say, "Deseka Machka, I like what you said about last names, but I'm still mad you won't take mine. But I'll never be able to say no to you. I'll annoy you though." Ugh, right? Like I said, not a single care about having game. He wasn't afraid to be enthusiastic and open about his partner, about me. Why would he choose someone he didn't feel that way about? Because, and this is a lesson I learned in my last relationship. The person, okay, you ready? The person you are compromising all of your criteria for, the person you are choosing because they seem like someone who won't hurt you or leave you, like someone who you think will not challenge your ego. Someone is easy to stand next to because you're not afraid of what they can do to you, right? That person you're choosing because you feel superior or whatever your level of comfort is. That person can drag you just as hard as the person you actually want, but it won't feel worth it. What you want, and this is what I can tell you now at my age, after my experiences, you want someone who feels worth the pain. Don't choose anyone who isn't, because if they can hurt you just as much as anyone else you invest in, you don't want to be standing there afterwards thinking, they just weren't worth it. Right? I let that person that I approached with such confidence, I let that person drag me just as hard as anybody else's because I felt better about myself when I was with them because they don't have power over me. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. And that's what I think about now when I remember those days. Healing makes you go through the pain yet again, and as you pull apart what broke your heart, it wasn't the awful things he said at the end. It was more specifically losing things about him that were magical. This has shown to be the real root of most of my pain resulting from that divorce. The loss of the beautiful thing I believed I'd have forever, and the loss of the dream of each other, in each other. I didn't have to do anything to gain his love and affection. I never had to flag him down for affection or remind him what day it was or ask for reassurance. I never had to guess if he was still in love with me because he told me in ways that were easy to believe. It's hard to fake the way he would look at me like I was a rare gem that if he didn't have me, he'd stage a heist to achieve. It really did feel that way. He didn't care to nitpick at the concept of reciprocation of feelings because he didn't care if there was some level of inequality in intensity. He already had what he wanted, period. His heart was at zero gravity. Now, I say it was a gift to have experienced it now. Maybe the idea that you're incredible enough to someone to change your life plans and instead bring you to his home country and introduce you to all his people back home, teach you all of the dances, teach you as much of the language as you choose, start reconsidering the ways he sees women among other conversations. All those things make it easier to feel secure. This is rare, as I realize now. Experiencing the present soup of anxious, avoidant attachment issues in the dating world reveals your own if you hold to your own statement of needs. Stop spiraling with your haste, and your patterns might reveal themselves. Yeah. Continuing to choose the temporal comfort denies us the long-term benefits of choosing well or not at all. Building a life that we enjoy enough to find it undesirable to change might mean it's harder to gain access to us. Maybe that's the key. It isn't as though we'd never had some big fights. It was more that it was becoming an issue. G hated capitalism in America with a white hot passion. There were many things I agreed with, and we'd talk about Marx and Engels, God and angels, and the context of our histories. His being Tito. Yeah. Mine being America. So I'm just going to leave it like that, right? The provocative way to state that. But also, then studying these things from a historical Western angle, I've been every partner's professor. I don't mind. I can't help it. That's who I am as a person. It's a benefit. Like, it's a feature. It's a feature. But in December of 2000, we visited Macedonia. It was my first time out of the country ever because my life had been chaos up until then. I adored his mother. His friends were fantastic people. The kindness was there, even if G had to translate something they said that wasn't flattering to Americans. Several times it was the response that this American, and there are different words that they use to refer to Americans. One I heard a lot when I was actually there was Americanka, right? There are other words, but here's the part I think is sort of unflattering. And that was, or unflattering from my perspective and the way that they spoke about Americans. They were shocked that I was not fat and ugly. And they said it this way. I just want to make sure that, that they said it this way. Nor was I a bitch. They expected to meet a fat, ugly bitch. And they put it in these words, right? Like this was the translation of their words. And I remember being like, thanks. He said, right now, just accept that they like you and worry about that part later, okay? And yet it was him fuming a mere week later as he had to sit in the presence of a man that had harmed someone in his family. And yeah, he hit a rage point, at least to me. So I was a sounding board for some of these ideas. And he did, when we went to visit that time, he absolutely felt different about a lot of things. And I think that my relationship with him helped raise awareness to the context of the lives of his family members back home. And when he came into our relationship and we decided to get married and him complaining that I wouldn't take his last name, that changed. And it's funny because I did take his last name. I went hyphenated and I had a bunch of students at Florida State, calling me this long hyphenated name. But then later on, he wanted me to take it off. Like, you're not me, you're you. Part of that was due to the reflection of the depth of my feminism. It's still that way, but this was a period of time when I was really coming into my own. But we can't get out of our heads. We can't get out of our heads over this topic and start pointing fingers at backwards countries when it's not like it's something we've seen here on the regular and constantly. But I think that was the point that I was able to make to him, is I was able to say, I'm not pointing my finger at your country. I'm not doing that. I'm pointing it at all of them. And I am pointing at the issue, not the country. And so that's the way that he was able to begin to trust me, so that it didn't feel like I was pointing my finger at a country I had defined along with other Americans being backwards, right? Instead, I was saying, no, this isn't about your country. This is about the issue and where we see it. This was a difference in my perspective that has made a difference with a lot of people, because when I can say that, And this is for you. Here's your lesson. If you can say that, if you could sit down and say, my issue is not with your culture and your country, my issue is the issue. My issue is women. My issue is economics. This was a conversation he and I could have a great deal as well. Here's the thing. Some feminists so often liberate men. They find themselves actually having good sex, complaining about the dishes, but then shutting up because they can now see that it's fucked up. Enjoying the release of financial pressure, even if they still pay more bills because they aren't paying all of them. Watching their wife dress in a damn sexy outfit for no damn reason other than it's hot and it's Wednesday. Finding strange delight in being told to fuck off as they realize they do not want a woman fearing for her safety or staying to have a home. Instead, they're saying, fine. When you say you aren't taking their names and think about how they don't have to lead, they likely assumed they would. Right? There are plenty of complaints about feminism too, but not all feminists, okay? Do you hear how that sounds? He wanted to know why. And I said I knew he wouldn't listen to me directly, so I'd give him things to read. It's a very uncomfortable dynamic to feel as though you are your partner's student, right? I get it. And then it's hard to turn around and tell other people, hey, you should really read Marx because XYZ, and you should read it vis-a-vis feminism and in these ways, right? It's more uncomfortable to say that than it is to turn around and take my work and make it yours, right? Right. And anybody who does that is doing that because they feel weirdly threatened. Or they either feel weirdly threatened or they're now seeing it as an opportunity to make other people think that they're more intelligent than they are. The thing is that I don't see it as an issue of intelligence. I see it as information and knowledge. And I tend to go for people who have the intellect, but, they don't always have the knowledge because not a lot of people have in the United States. And that's, these are conversations to have with me sort of at large, I think. But I think the best way to do it is just to start a reading list. Have you read this? Have you read that? But then it's good to do an exchange and say, what would you have me read? Right? As long as you're making it an exchange, then you will find that learning along with someone else is incredibly romantic. But when I went there, when I was in Macedonia, and remember that's now called North Macedonia, right? I want to, from here on out in this piece, to refer to it as North Macedonia because I do understand the reasons they fought to have that called North Macedonia. Go look it up. It's not my place to teach this, but what I would say to prompt you to go look it up is that there's a reason why they didn't want to just be called Macedonia. They wanted another region of the world just south of them also identified as Macedonia. Right? So fine, if they can't be Macedonia, then we're going to acknowledge them as South Macedonia, and we're going to call ourselves North Macedonia because we were part of Yugoslavia, whereas the other region is part of Greece. And that, I bet there are some Macedonians or North Macedonians, if they're here, like if they're ever listening, that they're kind of like, that's right. Yeah, it matters. It feels to them like South Macedonia was stolen. But I was only there a little over 3 weeks, but it was learning experience I could write about without the context of our marriage. There's nothing like waking up to your husband staring at the television your first day there while the new president of Yugoslavia, because they were calling it Yugoslavia still. I think anyway. I'm trying to maintain the perspective at that time and the perspective of now when I really should just like accept that somebody's going to want to correct me either way, right? There's nothing like waking up to your husband staring at a television your first day in this foreign country you've never been to, while the new president of Yugoslavia is passionately speaking and G would translate and he would say, He said that if America doesn't stop giving guns to Kosovars in 21 days, he's going to start dropping bombs on their troops. Yeah, and he said it with concern in his voice. I frantically said, "But they're here. They're all over the place. They're here." And he said, "Yes, they are." He looked serious, but said, "Machka, what are we going to do? Stop the bombs? Calm down. Don't tell a woman to calm down." But he was right. Like, what do you think we're going to do? Do you think that we're going to be able to keep him from dropping bombs? I doubt it. No, right? I ran to the calendar like it was for my life. There was nothing I could do. We were there and our troops were there. The British were there. They weren't coming. The British were there. Journalists from many countries were walking around with cameras. I was legitimately terrified. But then there were also moments where I couldn't convince him to see the experience through my eyes. And there were times when it seemed like purposeful derailments, right? Like I was like, G, listen to me right now. There was a group of people staring rather intensely at me while we talk. Why is that? G, you are imagining that. They are not. But then a later incident involved me asking him to stop speaking English to me for a time. It was just making some folks turn and look. Here I was with a full head of bright blonde with highlights. My natural color was platinum, and it started to darken right in my late teens, right? Or in my teens started to darken. And I just started to get some highlights in it at the time. So I'm asking my husband to be softer about my nationality. And he said, "They know, Macha. They know." And I said, How? How, G? Is it the way I look? He wasn't going to win this strategy. But as time passed and things felt more stressful for him, it all intensified. His rage was boiling over at times, even when it was funny. One day, and this is a funny story. Anybody who knew me at the time has heard this story. It's so funny. But I worked at a pharmacy at this time. I was a pharmacy technician for about 10 years, 11 years-ish. But yeah. So one day I was at work as a pharmacy technician, and my boss said, "JT, you have a phone call." That was her accent. "It sounds like G having a heart attack." I picked up the phone. He says, honey, I had a flip." Sorry. "A what? Oh, do you mean you flipped out?" He was always learning American phrases, and he learned it's the Southern phrases and would use them with that accent. "Honey, I had a flip." Yes, that. What he did is now somewhat famous. But so we lived in this incident is for your amusement. We lived in one of these typical apartment complexes in Altamont Springs, Florida, but on that street was a rather large Catholic church and school. Like any school, there'd be a line of cars trying to drop kids off. One day he had enough. He happened to be the first car in line when they stopped the traffic to manage the cars going into the drop-off. He thought, not this time. And he jumped out of the car in the middle of the street and shouted in his sexy accent, "Every day I drive," I'm not doing his accent. "Every day I drive down this street and you make me wait 20 minutes while you let the fucking Richies do whatever. You and this goddamn country and your fucking money." Bitch kumater. "Now, I will get into my car and you will move and make the fucking Richies wait." That is the level of his rage. If you think about it, it was justified and it wasn't wrong. Wasn't wrong. Of course, the crossing guard didn't believe him, but I can say with confidence that if he said it, he absolutely meant it. And he didn't care that there was a huge line of cars in either direction from him and the school's crossing guard because he was gonna fuck that guy up. He got into his car And the crossing guard, who was totally innocent to exactly how serious G was, jumped in front of his car. G revved the Eclipse's engine, because that's what we had. He revved the Eclipse's engine, and the crossing guard did some dumb expression about how he wasn't moving. So G hit the gas. He hit the gas, and that crossing guard had to leap into the bushes with every muscle in his body as G drove right through that mess of cars at full speed with the window down, shouting, "You have all the money." Sorry. I was going to read what he said in Macedonian, but I'm not going to do that. He said the faces as he sped by were of shock. But we didn't have cell phones as commonly as we do now, and nothing ever happened to him legally despite almost running a man over. But see, he didn't care if they did. It was hysterical. The point was more important to him than those consequences. But you understand now, though, that there comes a time in a relationship where you have to turn to that person and say, babe, you can't threaten to run people over. You can't jump in front of other cars. Like, you can't say some of these things and expect to stay employed, to stay, fill in the blank there, right? Like, there comes a day. I can recall the day I began to feel that we were spiraling. It was in 2001, and we just moved to Tallahassee, where I had also just met two of my friends. He had misinterpreted me when I told him I was leaving and going to grab dinner with my friends. So he had made us dinner, and I did not come home for that. Imagine how that felt. But it wasn't my fault either, and he lost it. My friends overheard it. They were concerned, but I could only shrug. But it got worse. He began refusing to work because he hated our entire system. And maybe being with someone studying to be an early Americanist didn't help that. I couldn't tell my professors that my husband was beginning to scare me a little bit, so they just had to see me lose my shit in different ways. One day, he yelled an obscenity at me and then told me to get out of the house or he'd kick me out. I can't be sure he knew the implications of that, but I repeated it back, and in his stubbornness just said, yeah, he meant it. You can't stay with someone who's threatening you, but I did briefly, to the point where we picked back up and moved back to Orlando so he could be closer to some friends he had from his country. But I found out some lies he'd told, and then he really began to lose it and refused to work, so I left him. Yeah. He moved back to Tallahassee. That's where we were living at the time. He moved back to Tallahassee from Orlando in a move that shocked me, and we separated for a while, but he was going over to, I didn't really know this until further on toward the end. He was going over to my best friend's house to sob and beg for a way to win me back, when honestly, in retrospect, the way to do that was so simple. It was just that it would require him to question his own behavior. And he would call another bestie for the same reason. And she said to him, I have no sympathy for you. And she was right. But it's just so, when you love someone, it's just so blurry for a while. So he went to his country and went to Macedonia, North Macedonia, for 6 weeks and came home at the end thinking we were going to work it out because of something I'd carelessly said. And his face seemed so contrite. He gave me this stunning necklace and earrings I still own, and it hurts me every time I see it, so I never wear them. Here we are, 20 years later, and it still hurts to write about it now, or it still hurts to talk about it now. Or it hurts again because in healing, I can see what a wonderful man he was, working through impossible feelings before all of that, and I think, if only he'd listened to his own words in English. If only. But you cannot threaten to hit me. refuse to work, lie to me, rant about hating my country, even if I had a lot to say about it too. Tell me I'm stupid and yell at me all day because I played a video game for 2 hours to decompress. He destroyed my console later, no joke, and expect me to stay. You cannot. I even gave him a chance to go to therapy, but nope. His pride dropped him into a divorce he actually didn't believe would happen, and that produced some truly horrible emails I cannot repeat. I can simply, actually relate to how he felt, but I wasn't going to tolerate threats and lies. Come on, quite simple. But do you know them? I say this laughing now because I have empathy, but it's like, do you know that motherfucker stayed in America after that? I thought he was going to go home. I thought I was going to help, like maybe make it so that he doesn't get deported. And but that his ultimate goal would be to leave. He did not. Though right now, it would not shock me if he was like, yeah, I'm leaving now. Like if he isn't already over there, it would shock me if he hadn't already gotten on a plane and gone home. Like, get me out of this country, right? Ooh, how tides change. I didn't want him to be deported, so I helped his lawyer under the assumption he was finishing his education and going home. I found out he was staying in America quite by accident. So G and I had 2 dogs, 2 Vizslas, one for himself and then one for me. But the boy, E, was first, and he turned out to be an international champion. No shit. My dog was famous. My dog was famous. I remember I'd make fun of him a little bit, and I made him watch Best in Show like a lot, which we just lost Catherine O'Hara, right? So I did not plan this, to be. I did not plan to record this following her death, but I mean, it definitely adds some texture. But it only served to make it better for him as we howled in front of the TV. Like, we both thought that film was hysterical. And part of it was because, weirdly enough, I'd spent all this time, among people who were into dog shows. My dog was an international champion. It was just, it was really odd. And also, it should be known that that dog, during the split, so he goes back. So during this time, he goes back and he's in North Macedonia for 6 weeks. He goes back for 6 weeks. And during that time, we had a conversation that I understood later meant that he thought there was more hope than there was. That's really my fault. I forget about certain things in the way that I forgot about things and they didn't necessarily translate, but I also felt pretty rocky about all of it. It was a lot, but I remember that during this time, E goes overseas. He was requested by other breeders in Hungary. He was requested to go over and to be studied out because they wanted to expand the breed in Hungary. And the thing is, it's a Hungarian breed. Vizslas are a Hungarian breed, right? So the honor that this was outrageous, but also the fact that this would have been around 2004. And, for studying him out, it was $1,000 for every attempt. And we sent him over. We sent him over there. So you got to think of it. G goes to North Macedonia. E goes to Hungary. And I'm left in Florida trying to figure it out. What is going on with my life? What am I doing? But the reason that matters is because E was on the internet as a first hit. If you just searched for Vizslas, the name of the Vizslas, and then E's name, you could find him. So I'm on the internet and I decide to look for my dog. Now, I knew that my dog was going to be in the same place as my ex, but that's not the way I was looking at this particular search. I just wanted to see, is my dog still alive? I think this is completely understandable. Is my dog still alive? And if so, are they well? So I do a search and I see E seated on a mountaintop. And as I'm looking at this photo, I look down at like the caption and it says where E is. And my jaw drops. So there was this moment toward the end of our marriage where I was trying to figure out how to make it work. And I was at this time doing anything I could in order to sort of alleviate the stress that he had, because I felt that if I just alleviated his stress, he would calm down and that he could come back to sort of looking at things from a more objective perspective. I mean, he had gotten so chaotic at this point. So we went to Colorado, right? So we go to Colorado and have this really sort of awesome trip, but ultimately unsuccessful because it didn't ultimately save our marriage. But when I searched for where he was and discovered that he was in Colorado, and then realized that my ex had never left the country, that he still lived here. Oh, yikes. Oh my God. And Sophie was getting on in her years. She was sort of getting on in her years. And I just wondered, it was one day I just was like, I wonder whatever happened to E, right? Like I wonder what happened to my other doggy. Like what happened? So I started looking up my doggy. And it's also important to know too that I didn't want my dog. My dog's name was Sophie. I didn't want Sophie. He got Sophie for me, and it was weird. It was like a, hey, happy birthday type thing. And I was kind of like, what? Because essentially it was like, here, I got you a responsibility. And I had demanded, she's not going to be a show dog. Absolutely not. So it was kind of crazy. I named my doggie Sophie, like I said, and she was a nervous mouse, but was beloved among my friends. And that hurts too. She was my companion for 15 years. And putting her down was excruciating. I'd sworn to never have another dog, but obviously I eventually did because my Samwise is my best friend. I don't regret having Sophie, but I was so pissed, when I discovered quite by accident that my ex was living in Colorado, near an area that would have reminded him very much of his home city, and had my dog there. So yeah, I mean that's how I discovered he stayed here. So music has this power to conjure the dead being the love we once felt and the sorrow we never allowed ourselves to feel in the refusal to heal before moving on. This time, I chose to heal, and it's been a long journey. He is part of what needs to heal, and I can't do that if I don't sit in the pain. You have to sit in the discomfort to heal instead of reaching out to just fill the hole with another person. That's not a loving way to move through the world, is it? And if he popped up today and said, Mache, I'm an engineer and I went to therapy, can I come home now? I might say yes. It sounds crazy, but if you ever fucked a Slav, maybe don't question my status as a goth. Just saying. So she is always going to live in my mind as the one that could have made me happy if we weren't so young and if we'd been better about his transition to American life. We couldn't move back to North Macedonia because Macedonians were still going around Tetovo, and they were blowing up pastry shops. Like this happened not long after we returned. And when I was there, I was also told that they were kidnapping people, that this was a very explosive area of the world at this time. Like you could just do some searches to be like, you chose to go where for your first time out of the country? They're still going around Tetovo and they were blowing up pastry shops. He knew this, but he loved his country enough to still try to talk me into moving. But he'd say, I know, babe, but can we just let me talk about it? And that might have made everything different. If I had been able to say, you know what, babe, I understand that you need to talk about it. And I don't have to take everything you say as 100% serious, and I could just let you do that. I wish I'd been able to articulate all of this then. I wish I'd given myself more time to heal after that divorce. I wish Sophie had a better life than traveling all over the place for my grad school, but Samwise seems fine with the journeys we're taking. There's this concept about relationships with people who are ADHD or neurodivergent, and that is that healing isn't on a straight line. Grief can hide. And sometimes the trigger that reminds us of a person is music. It's often music, at least in my life, it's often music. And so with that concept, with that sense, I can say that these are the moments we learn that grief hides. It hides and it plays peekaboo with the past. And I'd say 75% of the time, it's hiding behind somebody's album